Hello students. Today we will complete our discussion on sources by talking about architecture and numismatic evidence. We will begin by talking about approaches to the study of architecture. Now, architecture is extremely valuable as historical source material. Architecture is also one of the most enduring cultural legacies of any historical age. The study of architecture in the colonial era began as a part of archaeology, and it was only later that it emerged as a discipline of its own. Historians have interpreted various monuments in the backdrop of diverse political, social, and cultural contexts. So, to reiterate, this is where architecture assumes importance as historical source material. Merging with art history, taste, and imagination, forms and structures have been delved into, and styles and traditions interpreted. Monica Juneja points out that colonial writing on architecture has been dominated by the works of Ferguson and E.B. Havell. Ferguson categorized Indian architecture into a number of chronological stages. He pointed to Buddhist architecture, 2nd century BCE to 1st century CE, which was enriched by Indo-Greek influence in its later phase. He also identified a subsequent decline with the ebbing of Greek influence and the onset of the influence of Turanian culture. The next phase was regarded as Hindu and subcategorized as Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, and Dasyus styles. Here, a steady decline has been traced as, in Ferguson's view, the edifices lacked grandeur and opulence. With the Turkish political formation in northern India starting in the 12th, 13th centuries, what has been designated as the Indo-Saracenic style came into existence. And Ferguson here located signs of reinvigoration of architectural evolution. E.B. Havell pointed out that art and architecture should be perceived from within the tradition of Aryan philosophy. To him, Indianness in art was actually synonymous with Vedic inspiration. It was only in the Middle Ages that West and Central Asian notions of art had permeated the Indian subcontinent and mingled with Indian traditions to formulate what is known as Indo-Saracenic art. Havell's contention is that the pointed arch and dome that we see in Indo-Saracenic art actually had Buddhist and Hindu origins. Havell here projected the Orientalist viewpoint, and this has been obviously debated. A slightly later work by the French scholar Jovieux Dubril, who studied temples in South India, adopted a new methodology of appraising monuments. He preferred to focus on ornamentation and embellishments of a particular temple to gain an insight into architectural laws and styles. Efforts to contextualize architecture continued, and new studies evolved. There was a search into inner forms, descriptive narratives, and scrutiny into monuments dynasty-wise. Alexander Cunningham posited an argument for placing architecture in the context of epigraphy and written texts. This, according to him, would give a comprehensive insight into the link between monuments and the historical moments of their establishment. Historians of culture have regarded objects of art, and we may include architecture in this, as imbued with symbolism which reflected the spirit of a particular age. Marxian ideas pointed to the social history of art. Obviously, the theory that all cultural output emanated from social scenarios, the contemporary world gained ground. These were linked to larger spheres of patronage, religious expression, forms, motives, and regions. Architectural monuments became important as the backdrop of social and political frameworks within which they were conceptualized. Their inquiry was broadened to include stylistic genres, ideologies, power politics, and patronage behind such works of art. Academic investigation into Indian architecture reveals that aestheticism blended with ideological intentions in these representations of collective memory. Now let us look at architecture in the early medieval period. Now, we may first begin by saying that an Indo-Aryan architectural tradition prevailed in early medieval India. Innumerable temples were constructed during this long time span, providing indicators to political objectives, aesthetic impulses, and social disposition of the times. R. Mahalakshmi points out that scholars like Ferguson initially focused on temporal spatial analysis of architecture, geographical data, details of physical spaces where these monuments were constructed, ethnological backdrops, etc., comprise the gamut of information that was derived from deep research into such architectural monuments. The broad socioeconomic, political background, migration, relocation were some of the other trends that could be gleaned from this close study of a particular period and its architecture. Of immense significance was religious tradition, right, of which temples were the principal transmitters. Let us look at the evolution of religious monuments. Religious monuments have evolved from cave temples, stupas, rock-cut temples, as well as elaborately embellished shrines and temples. E.B. Havel identifies the earliest Vishnu shrines as monolithic stupas found in close proximity to Buddhist stupas in Varanasi. Indo-Aryan thought encompassed Buddhism and Hinduism, and this was reflected in the stupa, the Vishnu Shikhara shrine, and the Shaiva stupa. So we are going a little backwards in order to trace the evolution of architecture, especially temple architecture, in early medieval India. We can say that the Dhwaja Stamba, constructed at the gateways of the stupas, the shikara, which were usually vertical decorative slabs pointing upwards, which contained underneath it an inner chamber, and the mandapa were some of the typical features of temple building which characterize architectural traditions in India. The Dhwaja Stambas metamorphosed into elaborate gopurams, seen typically in South Indian temples, which had densely dotted the Indian landscape across centuries. Now, the Ellora caves mark the last phase of Buddhist cave architecture in Western India. And here, we can talk about the 7th and 8th century creations, which are slightly distinct from the earlier patterns. The 7th, 8th century creations are much larger in scale and have intricate sculptural embellishments. The Teen Thal cave stands out because of its 3 stories and the arrangement of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Kailashnath temple, dedicated to Shiva, was possibly built by the Rashtrakutas and is a marvel in stone. So let us continue our discussion on early medieval temples. In early medieval India, Kashmir, Rajasthan, Orissa developed their own traditional styles of architecture, while South India was marked by the intensity of temple construction under the aegis of the Pallavas, the Chalukyas, the Rashtrakutas, the Cholas, and the Hoysalas. Now, the northern temples were placed in the areas between the Himalayas and the Vindhyas. They displayed what is known as the Nagara style. The northern temples usually stood on a single stone square platform which had steps leading up to the main shrine. The shrine stood at the center of the plinth and had projections which gave it a cruciform shape, according to Upinder Singh. The conical-shaped shikhara rose upwards and was crowned by a round stone amalaka. The entire structure was very intricately and elaborately carved. The Dasavatara temple at Deoghar and the brick temple at Bhitargaon, UP, are remarkable specimens of the Nagara style. In addition to the Nagara styles were the Dravida and Vesara patterns of temple building. The Dravida style was related to temples between the Krishna and the Kaveri rivers, while the lands between the Vindhyas and the Krishna contained what we see are the Vesara type of temples. Beautiful gateways, Pratoli, Gopura, Torana marked the temples of the south with elaborate towers or shikharas that were central to the entire complex. The Garbhagriha, or the inner sanctum, was normally placed under the tallest tower. It was square and was usually in a covered enclosure. The temple designs were diverse. We find in the Dravida style, there were tall, elaborate shikharas, pyramidal in shape, growing narrower as they projected upwards and ending in a pinnacle crowned by a stupika or a small dome. The Parvati temple at Nachnakuthara and the Meghdoothi temple at Aihole are representative of this style. The Deccan style is even further elevated in the Birupakho temple at Pattadakal, a distance of 16 kilometers from Badami. Massive in proportion, it was dedicated to Shiva and built at the behest of the Chalukya king Vikramaditya II's queen Lok Mahadevi. Intricately carved and sculpted, this temple was really a complex of shrines. It accommodated a Nandi shrine and was perhaps the acme of the Dravidian style. To go back a little, we can also talk about the earlier Mamallapuram Rathas, the Kailashnath temple at Kanchipuram, which were representations of the spectacular Pallava religious architecture. Now, apart from the Dravida style, as I already mentioned, there was the Vesara style. So the Vesara style was a hybrid style. It was basically an admixture of northern and southern features. The later Chalukyas of Kalyani and the Hoysalas followed the Vesara style, which was intricate and elaborate at the same time. Temples of the Hoysala kings are to be found in Halibut, Belur, and Somnathpur. The 12th century Hoysaleswara temple at Halibut, the 13th century Keshava temple at Somnathpur are stellar architectural specimens of the south. The first contained 2 shrines based on cruciform plinths, and the second had a set of triple shrines with star-shaped projections. The Shikhara, which does not rise too high, is a blend of the Nagara and Dravida towers. Intricate sculptural embellishments mark the temple walls. The Cholas too were prolific builders, and mention may be made of the Nageshwara Swami temple at Kumbakonam, the Agastashwara temple at Anangapur, and the Brihadiswara temple at Tanjavur. The Bhakti cults remain the principal inspiration behind the enthusiasm for temple construction during the Pallava and Chola periods. Come to the question of patronage now. Now, scholars point out that grants for temple construction were intrinsic to the public policy of the early monarchs. Endowments, coupled with the patronage of pilgrimage sites, gave the ruling authority an overarching popularity among the subjects, which in turn helped to bolster up their political power. Of the temples built with huge endowments from royalty was the Lingaraja temple of Bhuvaneshwar, which is said to have taken 3 generations of kings to see through its construction. The Brihadiswara temple at Tanjavur and one of the largest Pallava temples, the Mukteshwara temple, underwent rapid escalation in terms of employees and stakeholders such as priests, dancers, drummers, goldsmiths, accountants, as grants magnified exponentially. Now, architecture is thus the indicator of political and the social. Temples also became political power centers, setting a trend towards decentralization in the power structure as they themselves transformed into landed magnates. We know that many South Indian temples were landed magnates. They were almost like feudal lords. They held so much of land and so much of financial wealth. Thus, temples provided a strong indication of political equations. So this is what we get from architecture. We get strong indications of political equations. We come to know of the understanding between royalty and the temple authorities, and therefore these are important knowledge sources regarding power relations in the region. Kings were not the only patrons of the temples. Landowners, chieftains, merchants, village and town assemblies were the benefactors. They donated in order to keep various aspects of temple-centric life continuously vibrant. Installation of images, gifting of gold and copper coins, and even of farm animals were very common practices of the time. We will now deal with numismatics. Numismatics, or the study of coins, is important as another source of historical information. Coins have been a part of transactional relations in human society from very early times. Right up to the modern era, coins have been the mainstay of economic exchange, facilitating trade and commerce and bolstering diverse economic relations. Throughout history, coins have been issued by holders of political power and have thus gained legitimacy and acceptance as a medium of exchange. Numismatics thus inquires into the organization and control of the production and circulation of coins by the state or some political power. Consequently, political, administrative, social, economic, and even cultural patterns of the time are revealed through the study of coins. So, what is the importance of numismatics? We can continue by saying that in general, in-depth deliberation over coins help bolster historical facts that have been garnered from other sources. Coins also have a life and geography of their own and do not always remain restricted within the political boundaries of the issuing sovereign. While political connotations of conquest may sometimes be assumed by their wide dispersal, coins also traveled with trade and exchange. Pilgrims too carried coins with them to religious places, indicated much trodden religious travel paths. The popularity of the coin itself has also been suggested as one of the reasons for their wide dissemination. Now, there are multiple facets of numismatics. The study of coinage is extremely diverse and fascinating as multiple facets of contemporary society are presented. The material with which coins were made, the source of these metals, the size, thickness, and design all call for in-depth study. Metallurgical analysis of coins help to expand our knowledge base and bring in multiple perspectives. Metrology, or the weight of the coins and the messages engraved on them, contribute vastly to historical knowledge. Metrology, that is the arrangement of coins by their weight, has extremely significant connotations. It continues to be an inalienable part of numismatics. Greater circulation and usage are important historical signifiers. Loss in weight due to constant use and circulation help to place coins of different eras in a chronological manner. Metal compositions are deduced by innovative measures like X-ray fluorescence spectrometry. Areas where coins were minted have been identified from numerous coin molds in those places. So we get a wide range of historical information. So a large spectrum of historical information becomes available to us through the analysis of numismatic evidence. In the economic sphere, we get an idea of monetary history, which in turn offers substantial clues about trade and commerce. The prosperity of a particular region or political space comes to light through the reading of its coinage. Heavy coins made of metals of higher value, persistent use, and escalating volume are strong indicators of economic well-being. Now, early coins had dates, legends, and pictures inscribed on them, and consequently offered a wealth of historical information. Time frames of the rules of particular kings or emperors, the dating of archaeological layers, and even political messages are added to historical knowledge through coins. They functioned as important royal message media, writes Upinder Singh. Social themes also find a place in coins. We find the marriage between Chandragupta I, the Gupta ruler, and a Licchavi princess being commemorated on a coin. The information that Ramagupta ruled between Samudragupta and Chandragupta II can only be found in coins. The Parthians, Sakas, Kushanas, and Satavahanas find mention in coins in a major way. Now, from early times, we find different types of coins on the Indian subcontinent. So as I said, numismatic evidence is extremely important for the formulation of the history of ancient India. numismatic evidence plays a key role in reconstructing the history of ancient India. And many types of coins were actually produced during this period. There were punch mark coins, there were die-struck coins, there were cast coins, there were uninscribed die-cast coins, and there were coins with symbols. Now, the oldest coins in the Indian subcontinent are punched mark coins, right? They were often rectangular or square and made of copper or silver. Some had single punch marks, some had multiple punch marks, and usually they were very heavy in weight. Taxila, Gandhara, Kosala, the Middle Ganga Valley, Avanti, etc. had coins which were typical to their region. These coins were devoid of legends, and they sported geometrical designs and symbols of plants, birds, and animals. The later Indo-Greek coins were die-struck coins. These had pictures of kings with their names embossed on them. And both Greek and Prakrit were used here. Later, the Kharosthi scripts were also used to inscribe legends into these silver coins. It is from the Kushana era that we find gold coins on the Indian subcontinent. These bore the figure, name, and title of the king. Certain local coins were also issued by tribal entities, Janapadas, etc., and these add to our knowledge of the times. The Satavahana kings of the Deccan issued silver and copper coins. These coins were die-struck and there were also some cast coins bearing legends in the Prakrit and Brahmi script. Apart from punched mark coins, there were uninscribed die-cast coins, made usually of copper but sometimes of silver too. These early coins were in marked contrast with the punched mark coins of the later period in South India, where symbols were embossed and these told many tales. They were issued by particular dynasties, and the dynasties could be figured out by the symbols carved on them. A typical symbol was the double carp fish, which was the emblem of the Pandyas. Such coins have been discovered near Madurai at Bodinai, Kannur. Legends inscribed by the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas were very common. The Pandyas used the legend Valuti on their coins. Makkotai is another legend found in coins recovered from the Krishna riverbed. Kuttuvan, Kotai, and Kollipurai, as well as the Chera symbols of the bow and arrow, and portraits of Chera kings add to the variety of coinage in early medieval India. In early medieval India, coins showed a decline in aesthetic quality, variety of metals used, and the messages they conveyed. Names and titles of kings were lacking in many. The Ganga Valley saw Bilon coins. With larger amounts, Bilon coins were actually made of an alloy of gold and silver with larger amounts of base metal. These were circulated in the Gujara Pratihara kingdom. Rajputana and Gujarat saw a different set of coins. The Arab rulers of Sindh issued copper coins from the middle of the 8th century to the middle of the 9th century. In Kashmir, coins were often supplemented by bills of exchange or hundikas, whose value was calculated in terms of grain, coins, or cowries. The Pala kings did issue gold coins in the 6th and 7th centuries, but from the 7th to the 13th centuries, in Bengal, we find mostly silver coins. They were known as Harikala coins. The Chalukyas of Badami issued coins in the western Deccan. It was around the 10th century that gold and silver coins were plentiful in the Andhra region. They were possibly issued by the later kings of the eastern Chalukyas. Whether the Chalukyas of Kallani and the Kalachuris of Rajputana also issued coins is an open question. But there were some lesser known dynasties that issued coins. Two of them were the Kadambas of Goa and the Silaharas of the Western Deccan. This was around the 11th and 12th centuries. There were a number of emblems on coins. We find that the Pallavas and the Cholas had emblems on their coins. So, we find that there was the lion and bull symbol. Pallavas frequented these two symbols, while the Cholas preferred to have the tiger crest as an emblem on their coins. The tiger, fish, and bow were used in inscriptions by the Cholas. So note that here we find that the Cholas are using the emblems of other dynasties, which indicated that the Pallavas, who were very partial to the fish symbol, and the Cheras, who used the symbol of the bow, had been dominated by the Cholas. Gold, silver, and copper coins were issued by the Cholas, and these were found in the Nellore district. These co-opted the designs, sometimes these co-opted the designs of the Pallavas and the Cheras. The Tamil word sung has been found on the reverse, as well as the words kanchi and ne. Right? The former probably denoted the abolisher of tolls, denoted an official who is an abolisher of tolls or a king who is the abolisher of tolls, while Kanchi and Ne were the towns which minted coins. And Ne here probably stands for Nellore. The later Cholas issued copper coins, while Pandya copper coins of the early medieval times have been found in Sri Lanka. Thus, the use of precious metals immediately conveys a sense of economic well-being, while a comparative decline in prosperity may be deduced when metals of lesser value are used for currency and commercial exchange. Finally, we come to cowries. Cowries were also in use parallelly with coins for commercial transactions. They have been discovered in Shohepur in Orissa, Bhandari village in Lucknow, and in other areas as well. This alternative money was rather popular in early medieval India when there was a shortage of coins. And we all know that there is a debate about the general decline and the use of coins in early medieval India. The debate, in fact, continues. Small-scale transactions were also done with cowries, whose monetary worth shifted according to demand and supply. So, we may conclude that coinage and research in the area shed new light on our idea about the past. Thank you.